And welcome back to another slightly different episode of the Bandit Room. My name is Charles. I'm here with Caleb today in this editing room here. This is part 2 of our 2-part saga with Mr. Manning Kimmel. Indeed. Sounds so dramatic. It is a dramatic episode, though.
It really is.
He brought with him the book that was written about his grandfather called A Matter of Honor, Pearl Harbor, Betrayal, Blame, and a Family's Quest for Justice. I believe it was written by Anthony Summers and Robin Swan. Really fascinating look into it. And
it's just fascinating to be kind of this close to something so historical. Talking about someone who's directly related to the Pearl Harbor attacks and all that sort of came out of that. The proximity to something like that is pretty cool.
Pretty wild. And he'll get into it in the episode. I don't want to take too much of his thunder there, but fascinating story. Stay tuned. We'll get right into it.
Let's go.
All right.
So, I see you brought the book.
I did.
You brought the book. So a little bit of family history for our guest here.
Oh.
So your grandfather, Husband Kimmel, was the commanding officer at Pearl Harbor.
He actually was the commander-in-chief of the entire U.S. fleet.
Oh,
wow. U.S. fleet.
My gosh.
And the Pacific Fleet, which happened to be stationed at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Did you know that, Charles?
Well, in our research.
Okay. Wow. Huh.
But
how come we never talked about it?
I guess we haven't.
Huh.
So is that...
You were too busy flying.
It's just... wow.
Now, is this a book that you wrote, or is this...
No. This was written by Anthony Summers and Robin Swan, who were 2 Pulitzer Prize finalists who approached the family prior to the 75th anniversary about writing a book. And if my dad was alive today, he would call this the definitive work on Pearl Harbor. It's the first biography about my grandfather from one end to the other and everything he went through from a young lad right up till the time of all this Pearl Harbor stuff. And it's just, we could take guys 5 hours talking about this.
I'm sure.
And I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but anyway.
But did you get a chance to hang out? Okay.
I knew my grandfather. As I said, we grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. My grandfather lived in Groton, Connecticut. And my dad, several times a year, we would get in the car or get on a train and we'd go up there. But he was a grandfather to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I really didn't know about all this stuff.
Right.
And I knew my grandfather up until the time he died, and I was a sophomore or a junior in college when he died. So I was beginning to get an inkling of what happened, but my real DNA kicked in on this after I got out of college and grew up a little bit, got my feet on the ground, saw what my dad was doing, and so I jumped right in with him.
That's
so
interesting.
When you were hanging out with your grandfather in your early teens, did you share stories about his experience there? No.
But what happened, Aggie, this is very interesting. Every time my dad would walk into Grandpa's house up in Groton, Connecticut, they would exchange niceties for 5 or 10 minutes, and the next thing you know, Grandfather and my father were walking down the hallway back to my grandfather's study, and there the door would close, and they would camp out talking about the latest, things that have popped up on this, what's going on, getting his marching orders from the admiral to my father. About we need to do this, we need to do that, da.
Right.
Many, many, many years later, that's exactly what happened with me. I would go up to visit my father in Wilmington, Delaware. We'd, hi mom, hi dad, and then we go upstairs. Now, we got to do this, we got to do that. Can you do this? Can you? And that's the way it worked. We took an upstairs bedroom.
Yeah.
And after my dad retired, he was a lawyer, and he worked with the DuPont company. And what he did in his retirement for 20 years was to work 40 to 50 hours a week on this thing.
Wow.
Trying to get this historical injustice corrected.
Nice.
And we converted that bedroom into what we call the war room.
Yeah.
And had all these new kinds of technologies for my dad.
Yeah.
What's this fax machine thing? How does this work? That kind of stuff.
Wow.
Now,
when you say the historical injustice, do you want to talk a little bit about the injustice that you're referring to there for people who may not be familiar with this particular thing? How do you summarize this?
It's less than an hour.
We got time. We got time.
How big's the hard drive on this thing?
Manny's got to get to bed. It's got an early day.
Right. So Admiral Husband Kimmel was Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Fleet at Pearl Harbor. December 7th, 1941, we know what happened. The Japanese attacked, had a very successful attack. So instantly, Washington, D.C. is looking to try to figure out what went wrong. And before they really found out what went wrong, they knew they had to put the finger on somebody. So they go right after the commander, Admiral Husband Kimmel, and his Army counterpart, General Walter Short, pardon me. And so they did this after they sent out a couple of high-ranking naval officers within weeks of the attack. And what would you imagine they would see? They land, they see blood, they see sunken ships, they see bodies. I mean, it's just horrific. 2,400 people were killed in that attack. So they went back, and their first comment to their superiors in Washington, the Washington High Command, was Kimmel and Short were derelict in their duty. That is absolutely the worst thing that you could ever say about a military man.
Right.
As my dad told me years and years ago, to a military man, honor is above life itself.
Right.
And by saying that he's derelict in his duty, you've stripped him of all his honor. You might as well have killed him. Well, they did this with no factual information at all.
Right.
None. Now, you got to keep in mind, there was a war going on. And we had to win the war against the Japanese and the Germans. So, after the war, there were a number of investigations that were held. Some of them by no standards that we know about in America. What I mean by that is there were a number of these investigations where my grandfather was not even allowed to come in and sit and listen. And those that he was not allowed to cross-examine anybody or question them at all. They were what I call modern-day star chamber proceedings, which means we don't care what you have to say, you're guilty. Right? That's not quite how America works. You're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
Well, in 1944, the first inkling of what really happened came out when a subordinate to my grandfather came forth and said, Admiral, I don't understand why you didn't react to this particular piece of intelligence, to this message. And my grandfather said, what are you talking about? I never saw anything like this. Well, what about this one? I never saw anything like this. Have to keep in mind now, back in the 40s, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have satellite technology. We didn't have 24-hour news cycles. Information was transmitted from one person to another through a series of consulates and spies and what have you had all over the place. So this information was being sent directly to Washington, digested by Washington, and they decided who got the information back out in the field. Kimmel wasn't getting it.
Gotcha.
So my grandfather, overnight, as my father used to describe it, went from a broken man to a raging tiger. Until the day he died at age 86, he fought to get the truth out about what happened at Pearl Harbor. Now, all these years later, it's been documented. This book documents it. There's lots of other books that document it. That the Washington High Command really should be accused of nothing more than of bureaucratic bungling at its greatest levels. The left hand didn't communicate with the right hand. They had the Japanese intelligence. We had intercepted it through what they call these purple decoders. We knew what was going on. I understand we didn't want to play our hand in terms of letting them know that we knew what they were doing. But when you talk about an attack that decimated the Navy and those sailors, it's just incredible. So all these years later, we have the facts. We now, I'm going through this very quickly. In the year 2000, largely through the efforts of my father and Congressman John Spratt here in your county, and a fellow by the name of Strom Thurmond. Raise your hand if you ever heard of Strom Thurmond. We were able to get a resolution passed by the Senate and the House that said, Mr. President, please correct the injustice done to Kimmel and Short. It's called H.R. 546. It was attached to the Defense Authorization Spending Bill of 2001. That is a non-binding resolution that's still on the books today, and any president who wants to do something with it can. We're now 22 years later. One of the key authors of that legislation was a guy by the name of Joe Biden. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Joe Biden.
Yep.
He was, of course, a Delaware United States Senator, and he was very supportive, knew my family very well, got into this, wanted to do it. He brought a lot of other people along with him. Senator Ted Kennedy was one of them. And anyway, what we're trying to do today is to get this in front of the president. Now, you might think that's easy. Let me tell you, it's not easy. We know on the world's priority list, we're kind of at the bottom.
Right.
Yeah.
There are other things like Ukraine, the economy, Aggies flying, all this kind of stuff. So we're using our political connections to try to get it there. But we've been doing this with presidents before Biden.
Yeah.
We did it when Trump was there. We did it when Obama was there. We did it when Bush was there. It's just hard to find somebody of the political persuasion necessary that can walk this thing through and get it on to the president's desk.
Yeah.
Because that involves political capital. And are they willing to risk that?
Right.
So we've more recently gone through the bureaucratic process through a thing called the Board of Correction of Naval Records. That has been bouncing around the Defense Department for about 2.5 years now. 2.5 years. They have to act on it. It goes to the Secretary of the Navy, to the Secretary of Defense, and over to the White House, right? It's just back and forth. Nobody wants to make a decision. And you might think that the war had started yesterday. We're talking about a war, ladies and gentlemen, that ended in 1945.
Right.
This is an incident that happened in 1941.
Yeah.
That is 82 years ago.
Yep.
Now, my dad went to his grave fighting this thing, and I promised my dad, I said, look, I will do everything I can to get it on the president's desk. That's all I can do.
Yeah.
He has to make the decision.
Right.
Gotcha.
And that's what I'm doing.
Was it at one point on the desk and not acted
No,
upon?
I'll
But
tell
it
you, one of
still
my
never
greatest,
made it that far.
one of my greatest disappointments, and I'll use this as an example. When this book came out
Yeah.
in 2021, right? That would have been the 75th anniversary. I'm getting my dates all mixed up.
Okay.
But on the 75th anniversary, there was a guy came to town to campaign because South Carolina is a presidential primary state by the name of Joe Biden, again. And I could not get to him directly, but I gave this book to one of his staff people. And I said, all I want you to do is take this book and have Joe put it on Barack Obama's desk, just like that. And he'll say, what's this all about? And Joe could tell him what it's all about, and this will be over with. Don't ask me how that message got screwed up. But 3 days after he left Rock Hill, I get a call from the local Democratic Party, and they said, Manning, we have your book for you. I said, excuse me?
I think I see where that
And he's autographed it. I said, autographed it? So in my library at the house, I have an autographed book. The title page of this book is called A Matter of Honor.
Right.
And Joe signed it, and it is Keep the Faith. Joe Biden, and he puts the date on there. Okay.
At that point.
So 2 weeks after that, his wife Jill
Yeah.
comes to town to talk to the students over at Winthrop University.
Yeah.
I took another copy of the book, asked her to do the same thing. Oh, yeah, I'll get it done, but hasn't happened. Hadn't happened. So I don't know. I mean, but we're not giving up.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to, when the Republicans are in control, we deal with Republicans. Ralph Norman has been very helpful to us when Donald Trump was in there. Couldn't get it done then. Now the Democrats are in control, so we're working with all of our Democratic contacts, trying to get them to help us out. So even in my home state of Delaware, You know, I've got my family up there working to get Senator Coons and Senator Carper to get behind this to take it into Biden. Because all Biden has to do is to pick the phone up and call, say, hey, Mr. Secretary of Defense, I want this done. This is stupid. And what is done? All we want is a piece of paper that says Admiral Kimmel and General Short are being posthumously promoted to their highest wartime ranks. Now, why is that key? Because at the end of the war, in 1947, Congress passed a piece of legislation called the Officer Personnel Act. And what it was a great big slap on the back to all the admirals and generals, flag and general officers, for what they had done in World War II, retiring them at their highest wartime ranks. Because back then, the rank went with the job. So if you moved around, the rank moved around with you. My grandfather, when he was Commander-in-Chief, was a 4-star admiral. When he was tricked into retirement, that's a whole other story, he reverted to 2 stars. Well, at the end of the war, when this piece of legislation was passed, hundreds and hundreds of names were sent over to Congress to say, yay, promote them to their highest wartime rank so they could get the highest level of benefits. 2 names were missing, and only 2, Kimmel and Short. So what we're saying is, give us this piece of paper. We don't care about the benefits. We're not looking for any money. We're not looking for a parade down Pennsylvania Avenue, although I think it'd be nice if we had a battleship named after Kimmel. But no, that's how this book got a title, A Matter of Honor. That's all this is a matter of honor. Because your name is the most important thing that you can leave behind to your successive generations, right? If you haven't...
Is the other family also fighting for this along with you folks?
The Short family is non-existent. They're just not there at all. And what's happened, sadly, is Admiral Kimmel had 3 children, and they were all boys. Manning, Tom, and Ned. Manning, the oldest one, Manning the third, I'm Manning the fourth, was killed in World War II. He was a submarine commander. He was not my dad. Then there's Tom, who was another naval officer, and my father, who gave me his brother, his oldest brother's name. That's where I got it from.
Okay, wow.
So the 2 remaining sons, Tom and Ned, worked on this their whole adult life until they both passed away. Their sons, Tommy Jr. and Manning the fourth, we worked on it together, side by side, for all these years. Well, my cousin Tommy died here 2 years ago. So this sucker has landed in my lap. And, you know, I'm trying to get this thing done before I say bye-bye to this world, because I don't want my kids are so far removed from this thing. I mean, you talk to them about World War II, they don't really even know a whole lot about what you're talking about. So it's time to end this thing. And if I could get, and maybe this program will get it to me, you never know.
You never know.
If I could get 5 minutes with the President of the United States, or 10 minutes on a program like Dateline, or 60 minutes on one of those news magazines to tell this story, it'd be done. It'd be done. So, you know, if I could just get Aggie to fly me down to Washington, D.C. and walk me into the White House, we'd be done with this thing.
Just make the request. I'm sure Aggie
That's
can
all
make
he has
that
to do.
call.
Yeah.
Aggie's a man.
Charles, you need to, Caleb, you need to hook this up to one of those programs.
Yeah.
Tweet at them.
Yeah. Got a pretty good lead.
That was a very interesting story. I mean, I had no idea. I watched a lot of documentaries about Pearl Harbor and World War and all this stuff. There's always a other side of some of the stories, but it never occurred to me anything like this could have happened.
So do you ever read books?
No.
Okay.
He reads occasionally.
Yes.
He's selling himself short.
He's not going to read it.
Right.
It will take me. I do, but it takes me a long time.
Well, I will tell you this.
Yes.
There was a History Channel documentary made from this book.
Okay.
And I have a link to it. Do you know what a link is? And
I made a lot of money on doing links.
And I will go back and send you my one-page bullet point summary as to where we are.
Okay.
And on there is the link.
Okay.
And you can get one of these young guys to figure this
I'll
thing
figure this out.
for you.
I promise. I'll watch it. I'll read it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, you don't have to read it. It's a movie.
Okay. I love movies. Yeah. We'll take it.
I love movies.
Now, he's been portrayed in several...
Oh, Lord, yes. Yeah.
Are you not happy with the portrayals?
No. As a matter of fact, to tell you what, the last movie that came out about Pearl Harbor was with Ben Affleck. And I've forgotten I should know the name of the movie. But anyway, my dad.
Midway? Is that no?
Well, I think there's.
Is it just called Pearl Harbor?
Yeah,
I think it's just called Pearl Harbor. Yeah. So Ben Affleck was the lead actor. My dad, when he got wind of this thing, contacted the Disney Corporation because they were the ones that produced the film. He was worried about the storyline and whether it would be accurate or not. And and he offered his services pro bono. They said, "Thank you very much. We'll handle this ourselves." Well, when the movie came out, it was great. We could not have written the script any better because if you cut away the love story, factually, it's correct as it can be. It's great. So if you want to see a good story about Pearl Harbor, and you can see my grandfather portrayed in that thing, that's for sure.
Nice.
Martin Balsam portrayed my grandfather in an old 1960s movie called Tora Tora Tora. Yeah.
So, I mean, Charles, do you have in your family, like, history that you know of this long back? Like,
Yeah.
You do?
I mean,
Okay.
my grandfather was in World War II.
Okay.
He was a POW in Germany.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was, not
Jeez.
good. Yeah, came back 90 pounds and frostbit,
Wow.
And he, like a lot of them, he did not talk about it.
Huh.
He did not talk about
You know,
it.
my own father never talked about his experience. He was in the Navy during the war. He was at Princeton, and the war broke out. He left Princeton, got in the war, and when the war was over, he got out and then went to law school.
Yeah.
At Harvard.
Just picked back up.
Yeah.
Just with a lot of
He
baggage.
never really talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talked about this all the time, but we didn't talk about
Yeah.
his experiences.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild, isn't it?
So nowadays, that's why when they say nowadays kids complain about two people waiting in line at Starbucks, it's tough life.
Tough life. Yeah.
The due date to file your personal tax return 1040 is April 18th, 2023. File Form 4868 today and save yourself from the last-minute rush. You can get a 6-month extension by filing Form 4868. Go to expressextension.com today and e-file in minutes.
So I know you don't fly anymore. What are your other hobbies then? I mean, what do you do? I mean, the free time, let's say weekends. What do you do?
When I get some time, I've got a couple of motorcycles in my garage.
Right on.
All right.
What kind of motorcycles?
I have a Harley Davidson 2017 Fat Bob,
Okay.
and I have a Triumph 2022 Bonneville.
Wow.
So I have what I call a little sports car and a truck.
I had the 2016 Fat Boy, the anniversary edition, and I rode it for like a year or two.
Yeah, you were a motorcycle guy that was the chapter.
But there was a chapter. Because I moved to the lake and it's an older house, so I don't have a garage. So I had to like park it in a storage room, and every time I wanted to ride it, you got to move stuff. It's like too much work. So
how do you handle your airplane? You have somebody bring your airplane out for you and have it all ready?
That's not a bad idea. I might have to think about that.
A man of your stature should have that.
I might have to think about that.
They do that. They offer that service at the airport.
They do.
Sure.
I don't get my own fuel. I call the fuel truck.
That's right.
Yeah, I just call and say.
Just make sure they put the right kind of fuel in there.
I hope so.
I
just call and say, top it up at 563 Delta Foxtrot. Boom, they're there.
Well, if you pay them a few extra shekels, they'll bring the plane out.
They do.
But they put it away for you.
I haven't taken any special guest to show off like that.
Oh, I see.
Everyone I've been taking flying, they understand. They drive with me all the way to the plane, and they help me, untie and everything. So it's been good. So what's the passion behind motorcycles? What is that?
Oh, I've always had a thing with motorcycles. I used to ride them when I was in college and got away from it when I came home from college. I didn't have the money. And I've been on and off again with them since I've been here in York County. But when I hung up the aviation, I had to have something to do.
Right.
The nice thing about motorcycles is I can just jump on it and go. I don't have to worry about pre-flight planning and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And, I can get on a motorcycle and go out and do 25 or 30 miles and just feel like a new person when it's all over with.
Right. Did you ever get into boating?
No, not yet.
No? Okay.
Not yet, but I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Thinking about it.
I just bought a new jet ski with 300 horsepower.
That's just what you need. You know, I was really wondering about him. And now I'm really wondering about him. 300 horsepower and a jet ski?
Yeah.
My motorcycle only has about a fraction of that.
I know. My airplane was only had 180 horsepower. This can do 74 miles an hour.
So how many times have you been thrown off it?
I just got it. It got delivered 2 days ago.
Delivered 2 days ago.
Yeah. So I'm excited about taking it out. Apparently, I have to use the first 10 hours to break it in where I can't go full speed and stuff. So I'll just use it now when it's cold, kind of break it in. And as soon as summer is ready, I want to get from my house to Papa Doc's in about, I would say, 6 minutes.
Well, here's the problem.
Yeah.
You have these things called waves
Yeah.
that other boats make. And when they hit that little jet ski,
Oh, I'd love to like fly over them.
well, you're going to
I
fly.
jump
All right.
it.
Why don't you just put some wings on the side of that thing and just have yourself a seaplane?
Just hold on. If you had to pick any character in a book, movie, or TV show who is most similar to you, who would you choose?
A book or a movie?
A book, movie, or TV show. Any kind of fictional character.
Fictional character. I'd love to say Superman, but
Hey,
yeah,
Take it.
maybe.
that's a good one.
I think so, if that's what your gut's
Just for
saying.
clarification, I have nothing to do with these questions. I didn't even know this is part of our segment, but I'm enjoying it.
You haven't been around,
I've been
you
missing.
haven't been around.
I've been missing.
We're just doing our own thing now.
Yes.
Have another sip. I'm just trying to think. You know, I don't get to go to a lot of movies.
Yeah.
But you know, I really like the action movies. I like people like Harrison Ford and all his, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And I guess if ultimately Tom Cruise is, you know, I feel the need for speed. I mean, just those action movies.
Yeah.
I think all of us like to push ourselves to do things that others don't do. Flying for me was probably the greatest accomplishment besides having kids and running a business. I mean, what it took for me personally to learn how to fly was a real gut check, particularly when I had to do my cross country. You know, they turned me loose in the morning, and I had to go touchdown at 2 or 3 airports, get logbook signed, and come back and be in one piece. Right? It was, you know, that was really, and this is before. I mean, I don't know how they train you now, but this is before we had GPSs.
Yeah.
You had to use all these analog instruments to find places and what have you.
Yeah.
Were you allowed to use that in your flight training?
No.
No. You have to use GPS?
No. We had to do all manual first.
Okay.
But the planes we were flying in, getting trained was all glass. So my airplane.
Wow.
Running, I just take off 200 feet. I punch in my autopilot and my nav mode on, and I just sit back.
Boring.
Boring.
All
Wow.
right.
Wow. All right. So, Manning, when you were growing up, I think you may have already answered this. What was your dream job growing up?
Before he went to figure out what he wants to do.
Right.
You know, I'll be honest with you. I don't think I had a dream job.
Yeah.
I was just really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I will tell you this. When I came out of college, I had a draft number of 13. That goes to show you how old I am, right? And I can remember going to the fraternity house, and we watched the draft for this thing called Vietnam. It was a war going on.
Yeah.
And we're all sitting there having a beer, whatever. And sure enough, my draft number was called 13.
Yeah.
I was number 13. I mean, you know. Wow. So I was in ROTC for 2 years. And I really wanted to go into the Navy. I just thought, I guess I got Navy roots in me, and I just thought it was the right thing for me. I just wanted to do it. But it didn't turn out that way, because when I went down to take the Army physical, I had an issue with one of my legs at the time, a knee injury, and they one-wide me, which means they wouldn't call me in case there was a national disaster. So I missed that opportunity. So that was that. I mean, I really, to this day, I feel like I missed something by not being in the Navy. I had a chance in 2006 to spend a week aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, all the way from from Honolulu, Hawaii, to San Diego, California. Wow. And those 10 days aboard that ship, with that full air wing doing all the things that they do, man, you know, Top Gun.
Yeah.
So if I had to think I missed out on something, that was it.
Oh, wow, that's a good one. Yeah.
Wow. Who would you say is your role model?
Has to be my dad.
Yeah.
He just, he was a no-nonsense, smart as a whip attorney. he never talked about himself. Had a great personality. Mm-hmm. You'd never know that behind all that, he did his undergraduate work at Princeton and graduated from Harvard Law School.
Wow.
He was just smart as a whip. Mm. But he had a great personality. He was as honest as they come. Had no tolerance at all for anything but the truth. Mm-hmm. And common sense, my Lord, did he have common sense. I mean, yeah. So he's my hero. Nice. And when I saw what he did to honor his father, how could I not do the same thing to try to honor my dad?
Right, right.
Because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Right.
It's the right thing to do.
Wow. Awesome.
My hero.
What would you say would be the worst advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, I can tell you that.
That was his uncle.
No, well, that was pretty bad.
Move to Rock
That was
Hill.
pretty bad. Yeah, that was good. You listen. The worst advice I think I ever got, and I learned a valuable lesson. And I don't know who's going to be listening to this, but I don't care. When we were about to buy our first business, we really didn't know what the heck we were doing. Mm-hmm. So we had some people who helped us. And I learned from that, don't ever listen to an accountant. Mm. An accountant can kill any kind of a business deal because all they do is they look at the numbers. Mm-hmm. And they don't understand anything about the heart and soul of what could be with this business enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think if I was to sit down with about a dozen business people, they probably tell me pretty much the same thing.
It's the exact same answer I would give you, man.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. So between my uncle telling me not to come to Rock Hill, too bad you're not alive today, Uncle Freddie, and the accountant many years ago, there you go.
And don't start that business. What's something in your industry that you consider underrated?
Underrated. Well, I really think just the power of personal communication. With all these tools that we have, like what we're using right here in this studio, it's still the human voice that is communicating from one person to another. Yeah. I think we found out during the pandemic when all these kids were trying to be educated by a tube, it didn't work. Yeah. It did not work. It's that one-on-one communication that makes things happen in this world. Yes, electronically, we can do a lot of things, but there's nothing more powerful than the human voice, which is why I love the industry that I'm in, because all it is an electronic version of human. We're just transmitting from one person to another. Right. I learned a long time ago that people don't make buying decisions logically. They make their buying decisions emotionally and then justify them logically. Yep. All right?
Yep.
So that one-on-one, if I had to deal with Aggie Sendelar just over a tube, we would, but here in the studio, he's okay. He's okay.
Other than your current field, what's one thing you would love to be an expert at?
I've often said that if I had not been exposed to broadcasting, I would love to be involved in aviation in some capacity.
Oh, you've done it.
Well, I've done it, but I'm talking about, I had a chance to serve for 2 years on the Charlotte Douglas Airport Commission.
Oh.
And that was a thrill for me. I mean, it's a whole nother arena.
Yeah.
I told you that I had been on this commission down here locally. But to be involved in a major metropolitan airport the way we were, it was just fascinating to me. Yeah. And that's a place I could go and, my dad told me, to talk about common sense, my father. Dad used to say that if you're working somewhere and you're doing this, looking at your watch all the time, that's a job. But if you look up and my God, the day's over with, the darkness is here, that's a career. And that's what it is for me in broadcasting, and it would be that same way for me in aviation.
Oh, yeah.
Since you're so involved about everything about York County, what do you think about that picture, that rendering there?
That's very interesting. Is that something that you are envisioning for?
No. If I was envisioning that, I would have completed that. That's Mr. Tepper's envision of the Panther facility that failed. So we bought a bunch of stuff from the contractor who was doing the business, and we bought that picture.
Well, as we sit here and speak, what you're not aware of is, I think it's probably done by today. They've torn it down.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
What they did is they basically sawed the legs off at the bottom, put a great big chain around it, and got some tractors and just pulled it down.
Right.
Oh,
And I think by now it's probably pretty much down. That's a sad chapter in Rock Hill's history. I think Rock Hill did the exact right thing, pursuing it the way they did. It was a great opportunity. Unfortunately, we were dealing with somebody whose business standards I do not understand.
Right.
He had enough change in his pocket to finish this project and do what he was going to do. But he decided to throw Rock Hill under the bus and make everybody else look terrible, and he was the one who did all that.
Right.
But I do think when it's all said and done, I really believe this, because I've lived here long enough, this will turn out to be a better project when it's all done. Because Rock Hill is great at planning and executing a plan that makes sense for the whole community.
Right.
My wife, I think, summarized the demise of the Panther Project here. She said, you know what? I think we've escaped a bullet. And this was not meant to be.
Right.
And had it become reality, we might have regretted it.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Right.
We got a brand new interchange coming right into that development.
Yeah.
We got 240 or 50 acres of raw land that are there. And when it's all said and done, 10 years from now, we'll probably all be saying, phew, this is a heck of a lot better than having an empty old football stadium. So,
John, our mayor, he explained it pretty good to her, the whole thought process of how we responded to the whole thing. Because from my perspective, maybe just because of my personality, it's like we didn't push back hard enough when they were spreading all the stories about Rock Hill. But John explained it very nicely, what was the idea, what was the thought process behind it, and where we were, what our standards are, and how we respond. I think it all turned out pretty good for us.
he took the high road.
Correct, yes.
And at some point, I think there's going to be possibly, they may have already had a reenactment of every step as to what happened over all the period of time. But I think most people now realize Rock Hill didn't have a thing to do with this.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
It was Tepper changing the deal time and time and time and time again
Right.
that caused this problem.
Right.
So it is what it is. It's over with.
That's why we have it called Tepper Tantrum.
In the Bandit broadcast booth.
That's what it is.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. Any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Nope. I will tell you that I'm very impressed with what you've done here at Span Enterprises. This building was formerly a grocery store.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you have really done this thing right. It's a very, very nice building.
Thank you. I appreciate
well
it.
done.
Yes, sir. Thank
Well
you.
Thanks
done.
so much. Thanks for coming by.
Sure.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Stick around next week and see what we talk about on the Bandit Room. All right, it's Charles and Caleb again. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming with John the Bourbon Guy next week on the Bandit Room.
Yeah.
So this concludes our two-part series. Caleb, what do you...
It's wild times, you know?
Wild? Does it feel like it was just last week that we started this series? And here we
It
are
was.
today.
It was, but yeah.
Wow. Time flies.
Time flies when you're
Anyway,
having
thanks for
fun.
joining us on this whirlwind experience. But it has been truly a fascinating story. And just to reiterate how we were just moved by Manning's story about his grandfather and all that he and his father have done to try to correct an injustice that had been done.
Yeah, and there'll be links in the description if you want to learn more, if you want to get the book, if you want to do something about it. It's all there.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for joining us, folks.
See you next week.
See you next week.
The Bandit Room is a production of Span Enterprises, located in sunny Rock Hill, South Carolina. We've been developing, supporting, and growing successful IRS e-filing and business management solutions since 2010. Go to spanenterprises.com now to learn more. The views and opinions expressed in the Bandit Room are those of the guests, and do not necessarily reflect or state the opinions of Span Enterprises. No information should be considered as tax, legal, or other professional advice.